Marlowe bounded through the rocky terrain, his smart weapon tendrils grabbing the sheer rock face occasionally, but only to ensure he did not fall, as he was not headed for the summit. He was looking for a new town to call home. There was nothing wrong with Jati, but he had lived there for almost a year. His feet were itching to move on. Beyond the mountains was the city of Rangam, the largest city on Venus's surface, and the source of most Silverine ships. He wanted a ship, not to engage in the fighting above, but to wander the worlds of Sol. The Silverine were exposed now, the Hearth and UNS both aware of their existence, so he was free to roam the stars. Ahead, he caught sight of something, shiny compared to the landscape, but dull compared to Marlowe. Its pitted white surface was definitely not Silverine. It was far too smooth for the Kraken either. It had belonged to the UNS. Making a careful approach, Marlowe slowed to a climb along the sheer mountainside. It was large, more than 20 meters. Its markings were definitely UNS. It was some sort of shuttle, built to fly above the clouds and among the worlds. It would be eaten by the rain soon enough, but from within he could hear a sound, a faint scraping. No Earth-born human could live here, so he approached the shuttle, searching for a way in. Despite being a bounty hunter, Ged had seen only 3 dead bodies in his life. The Hastur was far worse. Bodies laid carefully against walls. Cozy led him past 24 of them before arriving at the sick bay, where the familiar form of Angel Sava was hard at work. Cozy cleared his throat before speaking, still distracted by the loss of life himself.
Angel, do you have a moment?
No, come back when I collapse. She didn't even glance up, her focus entirely on sealing the abdomen of crewman Sloane. But there were dozens of injured here. The mess hall was filled with recovering crew. But the destruction of the Agassi had left few medical personnel to treat them.
You are welcome to wait here. I must attend to my ship.
With a nod from Ged, Cozy left him there, headed for reactor control. If they could get it running again, they could at least make for high orbit, far from the fighting. Engineering was a mess. Too many holes for too few crew. Specialist Amir was sitting in the stairwell, quietly sobbing. Cozy considered trying to offer condolences, but his own anguish swamped his thoughts. So he quickly strode past, soon arriving at Deck 16 and reactor control. 2 engineers were here, trying to restart the reactor again. 2 large generators were running, pumping energy into the reactor. Cozy knew he could not interrupt. They were under enough pressure already, so he waited. It was another 10 minutes before the reactor restart failed again. Both engineers looked defeated.
Is there anything that would help?
Cozy cautiously asked.
Captain, sorry, yes. We need more power to get the reactor running,
Specialist Warrens replied.
Normally, we would have 6 generators for starting the reactor, but 4 are dead.
Specialist Yarrow interjected. If we could salvage one of the Lapusha's generators, we could get it going again. She sounded hopeful, but she looked like she hadn't slept in a week.
Leave it with me. I think we may have a generator available.
Cozy shot them a smile before heading back toward medical. The shuttle was badly damaged, several tears in the hull. Marlowe approached it cautiously. It was teetering on the edge of a ridge, threatening to tip over and fall into the valley below. He carefully approached a tear, small enough to make access difficult, but large enough for him to enter. Peering through, he could see the interior, already suffering from the heat. Within the shuttle were bodies, 2 of them, both in suits of armor, bearing the UNS military logo. Along with them, a single Kraken lay bleeding, its skin torn and organs exposed, but it was alive. Climbing through the hole, Marlowe called out to the dying Kraken.
Do you still live? Is there any help I can give?
His soft and melodious voice caused a stir of tentacles.
I am a core heir of...
The Kraken drifted off, its limbs twitching for a moment. Marlowe moved closer to Hakor, quickly surveying the injuries and calling out to his mother's mind. He unpacked her, passing control of his body to her medical expertise. His copy of her was more than 40 years old now. They'd not been able to meet up for some time, but Laura was living in Rangam last he heard. Perhaps he could update it when he gets there. Laura began working on Hakor, carefully returning organs to their rightful places and sealing injuries. It was going to take hours, but the Kraken would survive. Ged stood by his ship, now docked with the Hastur. An engineer was elbow deep in its power systems, trying to connect its reactor to their own. He would have remained in medical, but his recent experience of injury made it an uncomfortable place to wait. Besides, Angel was going to be busy for hours more. He was puzzling over his willingness to help a warship. When the war began, he had considered it a bad move by the UNS. He was not on their side of the issues. Venus was fine the way it was, and its natives clearly wanted it to remain that way. But seeing the bodies and wounded, not to mention the state of the ship, he figured the Hastur was out of the fight now.
Jackson to Yarrow. I think that's got it. See if you have power now.
That's got it. We're going to try starting up again. The damaged comm system gave Yarrow a little distortion, but it was clear enough. Jackson and Ged waited and watched. The bountiful ambassador was giving them a jump start, Ged mused. It didn't take long. Within a minute, the hallway lighting doubled in brightness, systems coming online. Jackson whooped with joy and shot Ged a massive grin.
This is Captain Cozy to all personnel. The reactor is back online, so we will be going to 5 meters a second shortly, and should reach the Valhalla in around 9 hours.
Cheers rang through the ship until the engines came to life, pushing everything to the floor. The downforce was similar to Mars, making Ged feel strangely at home for a moment, before the smell and look of the ship reminded him where he was. Councillor Janna sat quietly in the council chamber, as did the other Hearth representatives. The talks between the UNS and the Kraken were not so much talks as they were yelling contests. Even the Silrine ambassador was silent, speaking only when there was a lull in the screaming. It had been days since the Kraken and Silrine ambassadors arrived, but all they had accomplished was to hand over Dr. Nuniko, a sign of good faith, but the peace talks were going nowhere. The Kraken and Silrine wanted Venus to remain as it was, while the UNS complained that they could easily live on Earth, so they didn't need the toxic atmosphere to live. The unwavering determination of the UNS was not winning them friends. Outside the talks, the Hearth Council was beginning to side with the Kraken and Silrine. Even Janna himself was starting to swing their way. He had never known Venus any other way. He was a born Venusian, and 3 centuries of living among the clouds made them home. The Hearth Council were communicating in the virtual, examining reports and projections on the wall. The Hearth didn't have a military fleet of their own, but they did have dozens of shipyards. They could build them, join the fight, and defend Venus. But too many councillors were undecided, including himself.